Welcome to the House of the Author's summary of HBO's House of Dragon's first episode. Unlike most summaries of George R.R. Martin's work, this recap is exclusively for writers to learn from the master writers involved in the series. When I originally proposed this weekly writing analysis, I assumed HBO would assign their best writers to the show and hire excellent acting talent to boot. So we would have the opportunity to learn from these top-of-their-game professionals. A few minutes into the show, I began to regret my commitment to this project. What a disappointing opening. The series opened with a voiceover explaining backstory in exposition. Well, that's not a particularly innovative opening. Additionally, it gave the series sort of a fairy tale feel, not really appropriate for something written by George R.R. Martin. The voiceover is by Rhaenyra, so we already know she will survive. No Ned Stark twist in this series. The episode actually opens following a trunk being carried by two old men to King Jaehaerys. Following something in motion draws the audience into the world. It also forces us to ask, what's in the trunk? The ridiculously heavy trunk contains a note. Of course, the heavy nature of the trunk is to make you believe the decision on the note is particularly weighty. The scene ends with more exposition printed on the screen telling us that we are skipping to the 9th year of King Viserys' rule. It's a major disadvantage to open with a not particularly compelling beginning. You do get some exposition out of the way. We know that the Targaryens have 10 adult dragons, that they count the year as 101, and it's 172 years before Daenerys is born. But still, that's telling, it's exposition. Why did they open that way? One advantage of this type of opening is that the audience doesn't have to figure out who the important characters are. All the characters on the dais with King Jaehaerys are the important characters. We can skip figuring out who to pay attention to and get right to plot twists. We know Renise and her husband Corlys, soon-to-be King Viserys and his wife Aemma, who is pregnant with Rhaenyra, also playing the voiceover, are the key players in this story. So, we know Renise and her husband Corlys, soon-to-be King Viserys, his wife Aemma, who is pregnant with Rhaenyra, also the voiceover, are the key players in this story. We also see that they are standing on opposite sides of old King Jaehaerys. The positioning tells us that there will be conflict between these two couples. When the heir to the king is revealed, Rhaenys' face is frozen in stone. It's clear she had ambitions that were crushed. Her face is half in shadow, and the camera angle is slightly uphill to her face. She is filmed from a low camera angle, making her appear taller and more in charge. Low camera angles are used to signal to the audience that this is a character with power. Yet the voiceover tells us that she wasn't chosen because she was a woman, at least in Rhaenyra's opinion. Viserys, on the other hand, has light from a window shining on his face, and the camera angle is flat. He's not lording over us, and his face isn't partially concealed in shadow. We instantly feel more comfortable with him due to the camera work. He smiles at his wife, and then gives a concerned glance to Rhaenyra. He's signaling that he's a family man and a kind person. In this one brief scene, the voiceover makes the series question obvious. Can a woman rule Westeros? This is a common theme for Game of Thrones. Are women leaders or chattel? This story question promises plenty of conflict, but the end of the episode, the plot has tied two women in combat. We also get a glimpse of how the House of the Dragons differs from Game of Thrones. This series will concentrate on just one house instead of many houses, and we're going to get a lot of palace intrigue. We know the show won't end until a woman conquers all the obstacles to sitting the Iron Throne. Backstory in this series isn't just delivered with voiceover, thank God. A lot of world building and current affairs are revealed in the small council chamber via dialogue. The advantage of delivering backstory here is that it's usually under conflict, and therefore more interesting. Look for small bits of relevant history and updates on what is happening in the wider world in the small council scenes. Viserys remarks that Renise is his favorite cousin, and he must have been okay with giving his daughter a name that honored Renise. But more than that, the writer, George R.R. Martin, wanted us to compare these two women. Martin broke the unwritten rule about giving characters similar names because he wanted us to confuse Renise, King Viserys' cousin, and Rhaenyra, the king's daughter. They are not only tied together by their names, but their similar situations. Renise competes against Viserys for the Iron Throne and loses because she is a woman. When this episode opens, Rhaenyra is awaiting the birth of a sibling. Here is her face while listening to her father crow to the small council about how he is certain his wife is about to bear him a son and heir. Wait, haven't we seen that face before? Oh yeah, we have. During the feedback stage of this exercise, I invited you to dig deeper into one of the characters. Now, I chose Renise, the queen who never was. It's not just that she's inexorably tied to Princess Rhaenyra, but that she is such an interesting minor villain or gray character. It is clear, even at this point, that Rhaenyra's path will conflict with Rhaenyra at some point. She is a lady of the court, so she has to hide all of her disappointments. She is practiced at keeping her face stone, so most of her emotional world is conveyed with very subtle facial and body language. This is going to require a lot more skill from this particular actress. Renise is not at all likable. She is distant and cold. She speaks in mocking voice to all but her husband. She confides in him, and clearly has a better sense of humor than him. We see her interact with her husband at the tourney. Note in this scene, everyone's head is lower than hers, and the camera angle is slightly low, so that we are all looking up to her as though she really were a queen. She is shrewd, but a little snarky when the tourney turns into a bloodbath. She understands the necessity of providing a violent release for the military when there have been no wars for so long, but disagrees with celebrating the birth of a new leader with such violence. Her snarky comments and smirk indicate she doesn't really take the lives of the knights very seriously, and so she's still quite unlikable. Her goal of ruling as queen does not seem possible. Currently, society cannot accept a woman in absolute power. Most people seem to know that Renise is bitter about not being chosen as heir due to her sex, but she is not seen as a threat at this point. There's no avenue for her to get her way. World building in fantasy is always a challenge. The writers grounded us right away by giving us a familiar setting. Syrinx and Rhaenyra fly over the Red Keep and then over the iconic red terracotta roofs of King's Landing. In the city center, we see what looks like a sept. But when Syrinx flies in through the ceiling, we realize this is the destroyed dragon pit from the original Game of Thrones, restored to all its former glory. The subtle point the writers are making? that dragons are central to these people's lives. Inside the dragon pit, Syrinx takes orders from a young, timid boy taught by an older, confident dragon trainer. Syrinx only responds to orders issued in Valerian. Royals also speak Valerian so that they can command their dragons and talk to each other. As we progress through the episode, we go from outside scenes to rooms with bright windows and bedchambers with bright windows to deep underground, lit by candlelight, until we are getting to their darkest core secrets. Symbols of power in House Targaryen include the three-headed dragon seal of House Targaryen. Like most Westeros houses, they own a few Valyrian steel swords. Dark Sister is Daemon's sword. During a poignant scene, Daemon gives Rhaenyra a necklace of coveted Valyrian steel, so they both have a piece of their heritage. Valyrian steel is from the lost land of Valyria, which contained magic and a knowledge of how to make this very special steel. It also represents, possibly, overstepping your bounds, arrogance, honoring your ancestors, and loss of an important heritage. In the original Game of Thrones, colors were not only used to designate a people belonging to a certain house, but they indicated character change. When we first see Melisandre, she is striking in her crimson clothing, even her hair is bright red. But as her story progresses, and as she sacrifices the innocent Shireen Baratheon, her dress and her hair become much darker, a maroon that's almost black. Likewise, when we first see Daenerys, she is the innocent victim of her brother and wears all off-white. But by the time she is destroying King's Landing in Season 7, she is clad entirely in black. Her character has digressed so far, the cinematographer even gives us a flash of Daenerys as the Angel of Death. Gold represents the Targaryen house, and it is everywhere. The crest of House Targaryen is in gold. Rhaenyra's dragon, Syrinx, is gold. Rhaenyra's clothing, frequently gold. The cloaks of the City Watch are gold. We can assume gold is a symbol of fear, wealth, or even power. Red is another prominent color within the House of Dragon. Of course, we have the Red Keep and King's Landing with its red terracotta roofs. The king frequently wears red. Rhaenyra sometimes wears red. The midwives are all dressed in red, and Daemon's dragon is red. Previously, the Lannisters were associated with red, so red became associated with treachery, but also with whatever was regal. I think we can definitely associate red with regal, but the fact that Daemon is so associated with red and black, I would pay attention and see if it isn't a sign of treachery in this series as well. Okay, but what about that color progression as a marker of character change? Well, not too many characters in this series are associated with white or off-white. Sure, Targaryens and Valyrians' hair is platinum blonde. Damien's concubine wears white the one time we see her in this episode. The King's Guard wears white, and King Viserys is building a model of Valyria in white stone. Black seems more prevalent in this series. Like Daenerys, the ancient Targaryens have a habit of wearing black when they ride dragons. King Viserys, Rhaenyra, and Daemon wear black and red on Rhaenyra's coronation day. Daemon is almost always seen in black. Like our culture, the Targaryens associate black with death. Dragons are also associated with death. What does his color preference say about Daemon? Like the original Game of Thrones, one of the most prominent themes is women in a position of power. Women do not have a claim to the throne by the beginning of this episode, but Viserys chooses his daughter as heir by the end of the episode. Given that the Supreme Court feels comfortable taking away women's authority over their own bodies, I can see how this theme is relevant even to a real person. I'm definitely interested in how this theme will pan out by the end of the series. Despite the fact that these writers did it, I would be a little cautious about starting a long-form story with a backstory-laden prologue. If you do use a prologue, make sure you have a compelling reason for doing so, and the scene you describe in the prologue is full of tension. We associate secrets and occult knowledge with depth and being underground in some way. I love the idea of setting progressive scenes closer to the underground as the depth of the revelation in the scene increases. I'm going to try that technique in something I write very soon. To show change in society or background situation, set up foils with similar situations and different outcomes. Reinforce symbolism for an object with mythology. Designate specific colors to mark character traits or progression through character arcs or concepts like death. Choose themes and values that will resonate with your real readers. I hope to see you all Sunday at 4 p.m. Mountain Standard Time or 7 p.m. Eastern when we analyze episode 2 of the series.